Frankly, I am both surprised and disappointed by her decision to step down.
Tonight, the latest on Jody Wilson-Raybould's resignation from cabinet and how a Justice Committee is dealing with the politically volatile questions.
They put in so many laws now that affect the traditional way of life. It's actually illegal to share anything or give anything away anymore.
And we go to northern Alberta, where a Dene man and a Métis man are both being charged after sharing some fish. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Jody Wilson-Raybould will not have to appear before the House's Standing Committee on Justice. She's been at the center of an unfolding scandal because of allegations the Prime Minister's office pressured her to intervene in a criminal case involving SNC-Lavalin. Conservative and NDP MPs proposed an investigation. They wanted Wilson-Raybould and senior advisors in the Prime Minister's office to testify before it. However, Liberal MP Randy Boissonnault and the Liberal majority passed a counter motion where only 3 witnesses would appear before a closed-door committee next Tuesday. Wilson-Raybould and the senior advisors are not among the witnesses. Nearly 3-hour meeting was often contentious.
And I would hope that in the interest of getting to the bottom of this, that Liberal MPs would agree that it's important that the Prime Minister stop the cover-up and unleash the former Attorney General.
And if you would think that there was a cover-up going on, we would have just shut this down at 3:10. Let's be serious, and Canadians know that. If there was some desire from our side to not shine a light on this, to not look at this, to not have 3 witnesses in good faith on the list today, we would have shut this down at 3:10. And so to say anything else is just to continue the memes and the social media bullying that you have coming to all our offices. If that's how you want to play this, then go ahead.
I am disappointed, though. I thought we had a motion on the table that would allow us to hear from the principal people involved in this entire affair, and the Liberals voted against it while claiming that they weren't somehow. It's disappointing for Canadians who are trying to understand what's happened here.
Some members of the government and longtime Liberals have been taking to social media to express their thanks to Jody Wilson-Raybould. For more, we're joined by St. Boniface, St. Vital Member of Parliament, Dan Vandel. Mr. Vandel, thanks for joining us. You were standing behind the Prime Minister in Winnipeg when he spoke about his surprise and disappointment with Jody Wilson-Raybould's resignation from cabinet. What are your thoughts on what's been unfolding?
Well, I share the Prime Minister's surprise and disappointment. Jody Wilson-Raybould was a fantastic cabinet minister, justice minister. She served with distinction. She was a role model. She still is a role model. So I was surprised and disappointment. I don't have the background information on what precipitated this, but I know that I know she was a very effective member of cabinet. She was a cherished member of Indigenous caucus, where she will continue to attend and to serve, and I think contribute towards reconciliation in our country. What's important, what's very important, is that the work we've been doing on boiled water advisories, on investing in education, on investing in housing continue, because reconciliation really is greater than a single person. It's reconciliation as a whole of government approach where every government department has to contribute, and I know she'll be a valued member of the team.
You're a former chair of the Liberal Indigenous Caucus. There was a story on the weekend quoting anonymous sources saying Wilson-Raybould only attended one of those meetings. Is that the case? And what do you make of these anonymous attacks?
I'm not sure about the attendance. I know she was there several times, but understanding she was at the time the Minister of Justice, and had a schedule that I'm sure was extremely busy dealing with all the issues that a justice minister has to deal with. So I know she was there more than one occasion. She was there. Perhaps not at every meeting, but she was a valued contributor, and she would also contribute on important Indigenous issues after, sometimes we would have meetings after supper when the House of Commons had finished sitting. So she was at several of those and was a valued contributor to Indigenous Caucus.
And your take on the Ethics Commissioner looking into this all?
Well, we'll see what happens. I think there's a lot that people don't know. We don't know what the details are, what precipitated the resignation, and I think it's important that a light is shone on this.
Mr. Vandel, appreciate you taking some time for us
pleasure.
here today. Wilson Raybould's father had sharp words for the Prime Minister. Bill Wilson says the Liberals insulted not only his daughter, but Indigenous peoples.
Originally, the Prime Minister kicked my daughter in the teeth and demoted her to an important portfolio, but one that has no power to make money, and really taken the voice of Aboriginal people out of the higher echelon power, and a woman as well.
Well, the Prime Minister didn't have anything kind to say about Wilson Raybould. She is getting support from others on the inside the cabinet. Defense Minister and now acting Veteran Affairs Minister Harjit Sajjan thanked her in a tweet for her work in the role. And Treasury Board President Jane Philpott tweeted, "You taught me so much, particularly about Indigenous history, rights and justice. I'm proud of the laws we worked on together, and I know you will continue to serve Canadians." We'd like to hear what you think. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. Find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptnnews. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the latest Indigenous headlines. The draft of the new federal legislation on First Nation, Inuit, and Métis child welfare has been shared with a select group. The bill is expected to be tabled any time now. On Tuesday at a press conference in Winnipeg with the Prime Minister, APTN asked one of the questions circulating around the bill, whether Indigenous communities will have jurisdiction over the way Child and Family Services will operate.
The legislation we're moving forward with shortly on Child and Family Services is a historic piece of legislation on many levels. It, first of all, responds to an extraordinarily pressing need within Indigenous communities that young people need to be raised in their culture, in their language, in their communities. Far too many Indigenous children are taken from their communities and end up lost and losing their cultures. That is unacceptable, and that is why we sat down with Indigenous communities, Indigenous leadership, to actually create legislation that they have been integral in actually crafting.
Well, there's another storm brewing in Ottawa, a wicked winter storm that closed schools and businesses across southern Ontario on Tuesday and is leading to more school closures and bus cancellations.
Very good news. We are so happy. The best news in 2019.
For the first time since the ice storm in 1998, all elementary and secondary schools in Ottawa were closed today. It's a similar scene in Quebec and the Maritimes where hundreds of schools are closed. Winter storm warnings are in effect from eastern Ontario through to Nova Scotia, with between 15 and 40 centimeters of snow in the forecast. And in British Columbia, students in the lower mainland and the normally snow-free city of Victoria were enjoying a second snow day on Tuesday. Victoria pretty much shut down as it broke its record for snow in February. There's a bit more snow in the forecast for the West Coast, but the snowfall warnings have finally ended. A Métis man in Alberta is facing charges after accepting a fish from a First Nations man. That story more coming up after the weather. Here's a look at Thursday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. -2 and snow for Halifax. -10 for Happy Valley Goose Bay. A sunny -15 in Nain. -3 with snow for Montreal. Sunny and 8 below for Saguenay. +1 with the rain-snow mix in Toronto, -4 and rain in Ottawa, -5 with the rain-snow mix for Thunder Bay, 10 below with snow in Sioux Lookout. Sunny skies and 18 below for Puckatawagan, -14 in God's Lake, 16 below and more snow for Winnipeg, -15 in Dauphin. Sunny skies across southern Saskatchewan, -23 in Saskatoon, 22 below in North Battleford, -19 in Uranium City. Welcome back. A Métis man in northern Alberta is facing charges for accepting fish from a First Nations man. That's because Alberta Fish and Wildlife say First Nations cannot share harvested food with anyone who isn't a family member. APTN's Tamara Pimentel visited the community of Fort Chipewyan to find out what residents think about those charges.
Fort Chipewyan is one of Alberta's oldest settlements and is home to the Dene, Mikisew, Cree, and Métis. The northern remote hamlet sits on the shores of Lake Athabasca, one of the community's main source for food. Here, fishing is a way of life, and sharing harvested food between First Nations and Métis, well, it's always been done.
People enjoyed sharing with each other because at some point they'd run across you again and they'd share something with you, so there was always a continuous giving and taking.
We help one another. Since I can remember, since I was a child, my grandfather did that, so as my parents did the same, and I did that since I was young.
But the community of Fort Chip is on edge because Alberta Fish and Wildlife have laid charges against a Métis for accepting fish from a First Nations man. In March 2018, Lee Ladouceur, a Dene man from Fort Chip, gave Kenton Klein, who served as president of the Athabasca Métis Local, 22 whitefish and 20 bags of walleye. Ladouceur says he gifted the fish to Klein for helping him out, but Klein was caught with the fish and was charged with 8 counts under the Federal Fisheries Act and provincial fishery regulations for accepting the fish. According to Alberta Fish and Wildlife, fish caught under the authority of a treaty right are only able to be shared with family members of the individual who caught the fish and may not be gifted to any other persons who are not also an Indian. Dwayne Roth is Klein's lawyer and represents the Fort McKay Métis Nation.
Kenton has been going up to Fort Chip for many, many years. He knows a lot of people in the community. You know, sharing of food between Aboriginal peoples is not that uncommon up here.
Ladouceur is also facing charges for fishing without an Indian domestic fishing license. Both he and Klein cannot speak with media while their case is before the court, so we went to Fort Chipewyan to get reaction from residents. Raymond Ladouceur is a First Nations Métis elder and former commercial fisherman who lived in Fort Chip his whole life.
It's shameful, you know, to try to charge the people, you know. I disagree with that. Let us live the way we lived. We never bother anybody. We help one another. What if I went up south, somewhere out in the city, and there's a white man that's hungry, they just have nothing for his family? I can't give him some fish to feed his family? That's totally wrong, you know.
Robert Granjam is Cree. He has a net on Lake Athabasca, which he pulls regularly to feed his family and his dog team.
They put in so many laws now that affect the traditional way of life. It's actually illegal to share anything or give anything away anymore. Like, that's not our law. Why is it that something by another nation is another group of people is infringed on somebody's way of life? It's really not fair.
But Granjam also says there needs to be some boundaries when it comes to harvesting.
We should not be allowed to kill 15 moose a year. You know, it's our right to do so, but we should not be allowed to, because we've evolved as a human species to take and take and take. We don't know when to stop. We've become a very greedy nation.
Roth says in Alberta there has not been a case that has been successful in establishing Métis rights, whether that be for hunting and fishing or having a say in oil development activity. But this case could do just that.
To have that precedent out there that there is these Métis rights in the heart of the billion-dollar oil sands industry will change the dynamic. It will provide Métis communities with a bit more leverage when it comes to dealing with oil sands industry, because they will be able to say, well, here's a case that establishes that we have Aboriginal rights in this area.
A portion of the cost for this case will be covered by the Fort McKay Métis Nation, who is donating Roth's time. 23 trial days have been set aside for early 2020. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Fort Chipewyan.
2 women from a Manitoba First Nation have been living in dangerous housing conditions for years, and they say they're getting no help from Chief and Council. Ashley Branson brings us this.
And then the rest is the mold. You can see the mold from here. See it? Oh my goodness. It sucks. It seriously does.
Judy Lavisier and her sister Lorena Sinclair live in the community of Ebb and Flow First Nation, about 230 kilometers north of Winnipeg. These are the houses Lavisier and Sinclair live in. On the outside, they look like your standard housing, but on the inside, it's a different story.
And then there's mold in here. You can see all that mold.
Ebb and Flow is one of the communities washed out by a flood in June 2011. Lorena Sinclair recalls the day her family was told to evacuate.
Counselors and a couple other helpers, they came and knocked on our door and told us that we had to leave. We didn't have that much time to pack anything, so we just grabbed what we needed.
When the flood happened, Canadian Red Cross swooped in to help find shelter for those affected by the flood, including the families of Lavisier and Sinclair. But about 4 months later, the sisters say their mother wanted to go home because of her health issues, so they followed her. The Bannock Council allowed the family to live in this log house from 2011 to 2014. Sinclair says because their houses were affected by the flood, they hoped their houses would be replaced. But that didn't happen. When the sisters asked about it, they got a response they weren't happy to hear.
When those houses were done, we asked for the keys. Oh, we don't have them. Go and ask this person. Oh, we don't have them. Sure enough, there were already families in our houses. And then we asked, well, are we going to get houses? Oh, no, you guys gave your houses away.
APTN tried to contact the chief of Ebb and Flow First Nation, Wayne Desjarlais, to comment on this issue, but he didn't return any of our messages. With nowhere else to go, the sisters and their families returned to their damaged houses. So what's going on with the window here?
Oh, it's cracked, so, well, when we got evacuated, they vandalized it, so the window was broken. So I just fixed it like that.
Lavisier says while they were evacuated, people vandalized her vacant house, leaving her with busted windows and holes in the walls.
I've always been asking and asking and asking, and no. They said they can't renovate condemned houses.
That's the ban.
That's the ban, yeah.
Lorena's house is in the same yard as her sister's. Even though it may look like your average house, she says the walls are riddled with mold. How come you're getting emotional?
Like, I don't care about myself. It's my kids that have to live in here. Like,
APTN requested an interview with the Grand Chief of Southern Chiefs Organization, Jerry Daniels, to discuss this housing issue and other concerns many First Nations face. But in an email from the SCO Communications Officer, it simply states, "We will decline the interview request." Ashley Branson, APTN National News, Ebb and Flow First Nation.
Well, housing was front and center on today's episode of In Focus. Highlights coming up after the break, but first, here's a story we're working on.
I'm Kent Driscoll in Iqaluit, and that is the Baffin Correctional Centre, recognized as one of the worst prisons in Canada. It's the kind of place people want to get out of, not enter. But one Iqaluit journalist has found himself barred from visiting any Nunavut prison after publishing articles about the inmates' complaints. And he's taking them to court to get back in. Why was Thomas Roner kicked out of jail? That's coming soon on APTN National News.
Here's a look at the rest of Thursday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta, where it's pretty sunny, minus 23 for Grand Prairie. In Medicine Hat, minus 19 under sunny skies, 20 below in Edmonton. Plus 3 and sunny for Vancouver and Victoria. Minus 12 and snow for Fort Nelson, minus 8 in Smithers. In the Yukon, minus 12 for Old Crow and Rock River, minus 16 in Watson Lake. Minus 12 with snow for Fort Liard and Trout Lake, minus 7 for Wrigley, minus 9 for Paulatuck and Colville Lake. In Nunavut, minus 27 in Repulse Bay, minus 26 for Baker Lake, minus 31 in Arctic Bay, 28 below in Joe Haven. Welcome back. Housing conditions was the subject earlier today on In Focus. What needs to be done to help communities deal with mold and the illnesses related to exposure? And we spoke with the mother of a boy who is now in palliative care due to what's believed to be exposure to mold in his school.
So we talked about it. The community decided to declare Jordan's Principle Declaration because it forces the government to act. They have 12 hours to respond. Up till now, all we've gotten from the minister is vague talk from, ministerial staff. They want to do something, they'll get back to us. We're 4 weeks into a state of emergency. It took the Jordan's Principle Declaration to actually light a fire and get them to start to send in medical teams. So now we need a medical assessment of the children, but how are we going to put the children back into mold-infested homes? They're going to continue to get sick. So we need the government to get serious about this being an emergency. It's not something that they're going to get to one day. They need to get to it now, and that's what we haven't seen from Seamus O'Regan or his staff.
Councillor Spence, the minister, Seamus O'Regan, has pledged to come to the community. How important is that to have the minister visit the community and see what's happening?
It's very important because he needs to see for himself firsthand what we're facing and what's causing, because it is a big issue, and if he says it's important to him and he hears us loud and clear, I don't see why he's not here yet.
When it comes to your child, you'll do anything. And anything in your power to make sure your child's with you and to figure out exactly what's wrong with your son. Because we want answers. Why is my son deteriorating? Now that they can't do nothing for my son, we spoke to the palliative care unit to do an autopsy on him, and now we found out pathologist is going to be doing that. We're going to be bringing my son home in a casket instead of bringing him home alive, and it's hard to deal with that as a mother of losing children before.
And you can watch the entire episode of today's In Focus by visiting our website, aptnnews.ca, or catch the replay tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern. That's your APTN National News for this Wednesday. For the latest headlines, download the APTN News app. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. We'll see you back here tomorrow.